Well, welcome to this week's show, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, I'm back in the actual Goat Locker studio this week. No virtual background in the video, the real deal, so to speak. My comfortable chair and actual desk, which I'm thinking about rearranging now that I'm doing these episodes on video. It's definitely an improvement over the hotel room comfort-wise and way more aesthetically pleasing. And, I returned home this past Saturday, which was October 14th. I departed Tennessee for this past coaching engagement on the 17th of September. Yep, it was a full 4 weeks, and they seemed to pass by in an excruciatingly slow pace. At least the weather on this past trip down to Carlsbad, New Mexico, and Midland, Texas was not as hot and as dry. It made my work much more comfortable, as much of this coaching takes place outside, as you may know, with these crews in the oil and gas industry. In fact, it rained a few times while I was on this trip. Quite heavily, too, on a couple occasions. My rental car looked like it had competed in a mud bogging race by the time I finished up in New Mexico. Then I finished up with a week in Midland discussing the next phase in the contract. Well, it's actually a new contract that is scheduled to kick off in January next year. I'm really looking forward to this news phase if it comes to fruition. The client is going through some major moves at the global level, and that might have an impact on this contract going forward. Needless to say, that means everything we to do with my schedule is in flux for the next few months. We'll just have to wait and see how things flush out. Let me tell you, though, it feels really good to be home after being away for the longest period of time since I've retired from the Navy. Of course, my bride held down the fort superbly while I was out of town on business, which is par for the course. You could say that she has quite mastered that skill. After being a Navy wife for more than a couple of decades, she has this whole me being gone thing for extended periods of times down pat. And there were some definite issues she had to handle all by herself that almost had her pulling her hair out on a couple of occasions. Some of which actually changed the direction of the show this week. On this week's episode, and since we did not get to discuss the lie about federalism in last week's episode, I was going to discuss it a bit today. World events, along with how that has directly impacted my family, led me to change what I was going to discuss today. So first, I'm going to give my thoughts on what is happening in Israel right now. I'm going to try my best and not be very salty in how I discuss the situation. It's going to be very hard. But right out of the gate, I need to say that those savages that make up the terrorist group Hamas, they need to be exterminated. Point blank, full stop. What happened and is currently happening in Israel for more than a week now impacts liberty and freedom around the world in both big and small ways. As you know, me and the family, we were scheduled to travel to the Holy Land next month on a pilgrimage with our church. That is definitely not happening now. That is just a small personal impact. As I said, we'll discuss what is happening over there that has bigger impacts here in the United States as well as around the world. Also, I will try and keep this episode as family friendly as I can. It will be hard, though, resulting in this week's show being shorter than normal because of the restraint I will have to be exercising while discussing the pure evil in our world. Evil that is being ignored for the most part, but also enabled by some that are suffering from the evil mind virus that is wokeness. So stay tuned and let's get on with the show. Welcome to a show where you will hear about how our liberty is being eroded by the very people that swear an oath to protect it.
Today, the president signed a big new anti-terrorism bill that would expand the government's ability to track down terrorists, but at some cost.
On this show, we will discuss many of the lies that the government that hates us, by the way, we will discuss the lies that the people in positions of power and influence spread every day.
And what is the best way to confuse children? Confuse them about their sexuality, confuse them about their gender, expose them to things that their little brains are not ready for yet. That is how they are confusing children. It is leading to chaos, and Big Daddy government, of course, can be there to pick us all up and take care of us at the end of it.
We will also talk about how current elected leadership at all levels of government has been corrupted by power and control, as well as discuss the types of leadership needed to correct our republic's course.
We the people. It was time to remember that we the people are the government. providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the number one priority for the United States right now.
I am your host, Larry Linton, retired U.S. Navy Command Master Chief and prior Tennessee House of Representatives District 12 candidate, and welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast.
Welcome back, folks. As I mentioned in the introduction to this week's episode, we're going to take a bit of a turn away from the liberty-destroying government here at home and towards the liberty-destroying evil that is taking place in Israel right now. Specifically, we'll talk about the atrocities carried out by Hamas that kicked off the most recent round in this conflict, a lifelong conflict, an ages-long conflict. Those people that are part of Hamas, and I use that term people very loosely here, simply cannot be allowed to exist on this planet anymore. The behavior that they engaged in is not human, it's demonic. Beheading of babies, shooting and killing women and children at point blank range, raping and savage beating of women and innocent civilians. All of these atrocities they committed should have demonstrated to the rest of the world that we're not aware of the savagery of those demons that make up Hamas, that these evil demons should be completely destroyed as a quote unquote political and terrorist organization, and that its adherents, their supporters, as well as their enablers also need to be removed from society. They are not human. You cannot be human and still support them after what we have all witnessed. They have proven themselves to be nothing more than savage animals, rabid animals. There is no cure for that condition other than extinction. Years of appeasement and concessions embolden those animals to the point where attacks on Israel, like those that happened last weekend, will become more and more commonplace. Appeasement and concessions only further enable them to achieve their goal of destroying the nation of Israel and the entire Jewish people. Appeasement and concessions in that arena will further embolden them to, and this is in their own words, put the entire world under the umbrella of their caliphate. Their bloodlust will not be satisfied with the extermination of the Jewish people. It will just move on to other groups of people. In other words, the rest of the world. There's an old saying about these Islamic terrorists and their goals. First, they come for the Saturday people. Then they will come for the Sunday people. Appeasements, concessions, granting them their own land and self-governance produce the results we all witnessed on our television sets, social media news feeds, and on the internet. What did Albert Einstein say the definition of insanity is? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results? Is that what the world will end up tolerating? More of the appeasement, more of the concessions, and to what end? It will get you more murdering of babies, either through decapitation or gunshots, more slaughter of innocent civilians while they are asleep in their homes, more rape and brutalization of women to be paraded for the entire world to see. That's what comes from appeasement and concessions. Of course, that's what these mindless leftists in cities and on campuses all around our country want. They want to appease the animal or find some excuse for their behavior. Or they condemn the civilized man, the civilized nation, for their response to atrocities committed against them. For what purpose, ladies and gentlemen? So they can appear more enlightened or appear to be peacemakers? Maybe, but they do not understand. The savages that attacked innocent men, women, and children in Israel will not stop there if they are successful. When every Israeli is brutally murdered, the savages will shift their focus to us. They will shift their focus to the rest of the Western world because they do not care about how much you support them in their savagery against Israel. They do not care about their atrocities were allowed to continue because you enable them. Once their goal in the Middle East is accomplished, they will turn their attention to us. conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, American communists. We are all the same in their eyes. We are the infidel, no matter how much we fight or support them. All of that should be plain to see, but apparently it is only visible for the people that are capable of critical thinking. There has been many discussions in my house and with my friends about what is going on in Israel right now. But former Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir, captured succinctly what the problem in the Holy Land really is. She said, quote, "When peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons. But it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. Peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us," end quote. Now that is playing out before our very eyes, especially with how Hamas is using the hostages, children they took on the opening day of this evil. Only savages will behead children or use them as shields in furthering their ideology. There's no negotiating with the savage. The savage will also put their own children in front of them while waging war on humanity. Savages will do and say anything in furtherance of their demonic activity. In addition to what people capable of critical thinking can see on the news today, these animals have put their beliefs on paper for the whole world to read and comprehend. So while the savages' apologists and enablers are demonstrating on the streets in major cities and on campuses all over the country, trying to turn the narrative to support the subhuman terrorists, the civilized person can read for themselves what those evil demons want to do. In case you are not aware of what Hamas's charter states, I'm going to share it with you. The first version of the charter, the one that was adopted in 1988, not the revised 2017 one, it begins with a preamble and is vastly different than the charter or constitution of the United States of America, which leads with the fundamental paradigm shifting phrase of "we the people." The Savages Charter begins with, quote, "Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it," unquote. The words were there for the whole world to read, yet the path towards appeasement and concessions merged with that savage statement. But that wasn't just one-off statement in their founding document. In Article 7, we read these words, quote, "The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, 'O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him.' Only the Garkad tree," it's evidently some certain kind of tree, "would not do that because it is one of the trees of the Jews," end quote. Those are inspirational, peaceful coexistence words, don't you think? Please tell me again what is acceptable about organizations like the United Nations or most of the mainstream media, or the groups of, using the words of Rush Limbaugh, young skulls full of mush on college campuses around the country siding with the savages. It is as if our world is purposely ignoring the evil. Just what is the reasoning behind that? I'm going to take a break right here, though, and we'll get back to this topic because it's sort of making me sick. I'll be back on the other side of this. And we're back. As I informed you all at the beginning of this episode, it probably might be a little bit shorter than I normally do. There's only so much evil I can talk about. But let's continue with the Hamas founding document, at least the one that wasn't watered down, the original 1988 version, not the 2017 one. Article 32 of the Charter of the Savages states this, quote, "The Islamic resistance movement considers itself to be the spearhead of the circle of struggle with world Zionism and a step on the road. The movement adds its efforts to the efforts of all those who are active in the Palestinian arena. Arab and Islamic peoples should augment by further steps on their part. Islamic groupings all over the Arab world should also do the same, since all of these are the best equipped for the future role in the fight with the warmongering Jews. End quote. Like I said, for full transparency, I'm only quoting the original document. The Savages had to soften their message in 2017 in order to get more support from those incapable of critical thinking, incapable of truly seeing the Savages for what they truly are. This enabling of the Savages is on full display here in our own government, with a congresswoman that should be extremely grateful for the opportunities this country has provided her as a refugee from one of those poop hole countries that sees her elevated to service in the House of Representatives. Is she grateful? Absolutely not. Not only is she working hard with very willing allies in the media and government to transform our nation into a mirror of the poop hole third world country that is ruled by warlords that she escaped from, she is one of the biggest apologists and enablers of the Savages. In fact, she even has the Palestinian flag displayed outside her office in our nation's capital. Disgusting, right? And she is only a small part in the much bigger effort to support and enable these Savages. Even the dumbest member of the House of Representatives, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she has been all over social media and cable news shows advocating for policies that will only further enable the destruction of Israel and the extermination of the Jewish people. Even during one of her social media interviews, she emulated another one of the least intelligent members of the House of Representatives, Eric Swalwell. Not so much in words, but in deeds. How so, you may ask? Well, she had her own bout with flatulence while exhibiting diarrhea of the mouth. See what I did there? Anyway, her emittance was not quite as loud as Swalwell's imitation of a gaseous mountain gorilla. It was still there for all of her fellow brain-dead followers to hear. It's just another example how we are no longer a serious country. Well, at least our government is filled with people that cannot be taken seriously. Swalwell, AOC, and the prime example of Quasimodo, Senator Fetterman, presiding over the United States Senate in shorts, flip-flops, and a hoodie. Even their leader, rotting bag of oatmeal for brains Biden, recently continued the enabling apologists for Savage's message. Just yesterday, he tweeted out a statement that said, "We must not lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas's appalling attacks and are suffering as a result of them." As if there's any truth behind that statement. Hamas was elected to be the governing authority in Gaza. The quote unquote Palestinians chose to be led by the Savages, knowing full well what that meant. These apologists and enablers of Savages continue to push the lie about the land of Palestine in a show of solidarity with the demons in the Middle East. George Orwell's book, 1984, just doesn't apply to what is happening in our culture here at home. It applies to the entire world with regard to Palestine. Before I share with you some of the history of the land that the Savages and their enablers, especially here at home in our government, refer to as Palestine, I want to share with you some quotes from George Orwell's book. And here's one. Quote, "Who controls the past," ran the party slogan, "controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." Unquote. Or how about this one? Quote, "The past was erased, the erasure was forgotten, and the lie became the truth." Unquote. Now, those two quotes are very applicable to the lies consumed, then regurgitated by a compliant media, the corrupt United Nations, members of the United States government, and most loudly by the young skulls full of mush on college campuses and in major cities all across the fruited plains. In the 2017 Hamas Charter, it states Palestine, which extends from the River Jordan in the east to the Mediterranean in the west, and from Ras al-Nakura in the north to al-Rashrash in the south, is an integral territorial unit. It is the land and the home of the Palestinian people. Now, that contains just a kernel of truth, because Palestine was originally called Syria Palestinia. It was a province, though, created by the Roman Empire, a province created after the Roman Empire crushed the nation of Israel after a revolt that occurred between 132 to 136 AD. The nation of, or people called Israel, occupied the land that was described as Palestine for hundreds of years prior to that. It was, and always has been, the homeland of the Jewish people, long before Rome named the area Palestine. That is a historical truth that is available for everybody to research, but is glossed over or ignored, not only by the savages, but by those that enable and support the savages. It cannot be discussed openly because it destroys the narrative that the Palestinian people are an oppressed group of people. What it all boils down to is the simple fact that Hamas is a group of savages that want the annihilation of all Jewish people, and their savagery will not stop there if they are successful. The subhuman savages want to kill all infidels and place the world under their dominion. It's in their own words. We have to believe them when they speak. All right, so we're going to be back for the show's closing segment right after this short break, fellow patriots. Stay tuned. And we're back for this week's closing, folks. I want to use this segment to somewhat inform you why I take the position in support of Israel and against the savages. I don't want to give you some sort of nuanced answer. I will be plain. It may upset some of you, or it may not. That's fine. I'm definitely not everybody's cup of tea, so to say, and that is fine too. There are people in my close circle that do not feel the same way as I do, and I'm okay with that as well. I also realize that some people's positions have nothing to do with what I believe is a war between good and evil, but are tired of our republic getting into another foreign entanglement in the Middle East. I'm not advocating for getting our troops, our nation's sons and daughters, involved in another unconstitutional war. I just want everyone to be aware of the evil and the lies that cover up what the savages really are and what they really want. I also want you to know why I believe I am on the side of good in this fight against evil. My pastor summed it up quite perfectly in yesterday's message at church. I support the nation of Israel and the Jewish people because my faith is anchored in an empty tomb in Jerusalem. My Lord and Savior was born to a Jewish mother in the ancestral land of Israel, a land promised to the descendants of Abraham, the father of all nations, by our Creator. When Jesus Christ comes again, he will come again to the city of Jerusalem and sit on the throne in God's chosen city. While the Jewish people have turned and not recognized Jesus as the Son of God, the Messiah, who died on the cross as payment for the sins of mankind, and then was resurrected so that I, along with everybody else, could have access to a personal relationship with our Creator. When he returns, and it won't be to a city in Russia, it won't be a city in the United States, it won't be a city in any other place other than Jerusalem. And when he returns, every knee will bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. I stand with God, always. And with that, folks, that is all the time I have for this week's episode. In closing, we have this week's wisdom from God's Word. And today it comes to us from Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Hamas and their enablers are the representatives of darkness in this world. They are the ones that serve the wickedness in high places. They are savages bent on putting the entire world under their dominion. In the end, we know who wins. By standing with God and the descendants of Abraham, I'm fighting from a place of promised victory. Once again, thank you all for listening, and I pray you all enjoy the week ahead and that you all take a stand in the arena against the evil, against the savages, and that those that support them. I ask you all to pray for the nation of Israel, that God's will be done in his promised land. Until next week, stand in the arena with me. Reveille, it's time to wake up.